Thanks for having me here. I want to talk about what's going to happen on tax reform. It's an important issue, and as you just heard, tax policy can do wonders, or it can do travesties to businesses trying to do business in this country. And there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of tax reform, and I'm talking fundamental tax reform, not just sort of playing with the rates and sort of nibbling at the margins. We have a tax code that is in dire need of reform, and Freedom Works is here to hopefully help you guys get involved. And over the debate that's going to be starting in the fall, we want to make sure that we end up with some good legislation that provides lower rates and a broader base and helps everybody, not just those who have the best lobbyists in Washington. Now, for any tax code, and we've known this for years, 200 years ago, Adam Smith, who's the founder of modern economics, he wrote a textbook called The Wealth of Nations that sort of influenced our founding fathers to a huge extent. And he basically said, look, if you're going to tax your people, it has to be simple, it has to be fair, and it has to be efficient. And if you look at our tax code, how do we do on those three variables there? We're 0 for 3 there. Is it simple? No, our tax code is 74,000 pages long. And it's growing every year. So it's a mess. It takes, basically, I think they've looked at the paperwork burden that the IRS puts on us, 6 billion hours. How many man hours or woman hours can you do with productive, actually producing products and actually getting things on the market and being successful, or do you take those 6 billion hours just to fill out forms to satisfy the governor or the government so you can pay your taxes? So we don't have a simple tax code. Another great example is there've been studies that have been done. People call the IRS. They have a hotline where you can call for questions on your taxes, and they don't know how to answer your questions. The tax code is so complex. Depending on who you talk to at the IRS, you're going to get a different answer. So you're always liable for potentially paying more taxes at the end of the day. So definitely, we don't have a simple tax code. Is it a fair tax code? No, it's not fair at all. You have people making the same amount of money, the same income, and they're paying vastly different tax rates. And clearly, there's an unfairness to that, and it crosses all across the way we pay taxes, from if you're renting or if you own a home, if you're a small business, if you're a big business. All of these things are built into the tax code, so we don't have a fair tax code. We don't have a way to easily collect taxes, which is what the government's supposed to do. And is it efficient? Again, it's not efficient at all. If you look at your IRS form next time you're filling it out, they guesstimate that the amount that you're going to have to pay in terms of getting it done is about $270 per person, and it's going to take you about 16 hours. That's definitely not an efficient way to collect taxes. But the problem is each page in that 74,000 page tax code is there because some lobbyist or some tax lawyer wants it there. So we have a situation where we've got this huge tax code, and rather than looking at fundamental reform, every year you have these tax lobbyists that go to the Hill and go to the tax committees and talk about how they can get a carve-out or a loophole for themselves, and that gets into the law. And meanwhile, and this is hopefully where a group like Freedom Works can come in. The typical person doesn't have that kind of representation in Washington on the Hill. We don't have lawyers and lobbyists wandering the halls of Congress, but Freedom Works tries to help make that happen, and we hope to be a voice for activists like you. So when we do come to the tax reform debate, we want to be able to get engaged, and we want to be able to get you guys engaged so we can actually do some real fundamental reforms to the tax code. And I think clearly we have a rare opportunity right now. It's a Republican White House, it's a Republican Senate, it's a Republican House. Obviously, we know that doesn't mean that we get what we want, because we've been through the Obamacare travesty. So, but I think people are more fine-tuned and more frustrated. President Trump wants a win. He wants something on the wall that says, yes, I've delivered my promises here. And I think the House and Senate realize that they have got to get on board and give their base something that they can be happy about. So tax reform, I think, is teed up, and we really need to push them hard, because they're not going to want to do this on their own. They're going to need to hear from activists to make this happen. And the reason is, as I said, every one of those pages in the tax code is something that somebody put there. So when we start talking about fundamental reform, all the alarm bells in Washington go off, and everybody sends their lobbyists back to the Hill and say, wait a minute, what happened to my carve-out? So it's that kind of fight is what we're in for as we go through this tax debate. And we want lower rates. Obviously, that's something we all need, but at the same time, we do need this fundamental tax reform. We want to do something that actually restructures the tax code in a much better way. So lower rates, yes. I mean, our corporate rates are the highest in the developed world. We need to get those down. We can close some of these carve-outs, close some of these loopholes that people have got for themselves. And we can simplify the code. There's no reason it should take 16 hours to pay your taxes. You know, if you went, you know, FreedomWorks supports a flat tax, and I know a lot of you guys like the fair tax. But either way, you're getting your tax payments down to a postcard. It takes a few minutes, fill it out, you're done. That's what we want to do here. But as I said, it's not easy, and I want to go through a couple things that to be wary of as you start to hear about this debate. And the first is this idea of being revenue neutral. And that's, I think, a real danger from when we start to talk about tax reform. They say, yeah, we'll restructure the code, but just as long as what we have at the end of the day brings in the same amount of revenue as we have now. But when you put the debate in those terms, what you're doing is setting up a circular firing squad. So, because you're not changing the size of the pie, you're just sort of rearranging the pieces. So everybody who has a vested interest in the current code is going to get out there and fight tooth and nail to keep what they have. So you end up not being able to make the real fundamental reforms that you want. So this is something that we really have to look forward to, and I'm sure it's going to come up. There's already been talk about, you know, Ryan and others starting to say, well, we need a revenue neutral code. I think McConnell has said the same. But we can't go that route necessarily and get what we want. So we really want to hold their feet to the fire on this one. And the other thing is we want legislation. We don't want to do this through reconciliation. We want a tax bill that is voted on and put in place. If you go the reconciliation route, it's not permanent. It takes fewer votes, so it's easier to do, and it's what Congress likes to fall back on because it's less work for Congress. But if you do the reconciliation, it's like the Bush tax cuts. They go away once they expire. So we want to push for a tax bill that is fundamental reform, that's broader, simpler, and fairer, and we want to make sure it's permanently put in law. So don't go the reconciliation route. Go for a good piece of legislation, and make sure we don't get trapped up in this debate about being revenue neutral or not. As I said, FreedomWorks is going to be, working this debate very hard. You can go to our website, freedomworks.org, and we'll have updates for you. If you're signed up for our emails, we'll let you know when it's a good time to get involved and get informed, and start hitting your Congress people up for making sure they make the right votes that we need. So that's what I have. I could go on and on about taxes, but nobody likes to talk about death and taxes. So I will leave it at that. And like I said, let's be busy this fall and hopefully get some real reform done. Thank you.